Hello and welcome to another edition of the award-winning In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Monday, September 30th. Peter Thomas Fornital back with you alongside Nick Tammaro. If you're watching us on the In the Money Media YouTube channel, welcome. You're getting to see this one a little early. That's going to be the benefit, I think, these next couple weeks. If you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, you have an opportunity to get these shows maybe before I stitch them together with other stuff on the audio side. And if you're on the audio side, hey, get in the conversation in the comments over on YouTube. We had some good back and forth about our the top 10 video last week. We're hoping to do that now through Breeders' Cup season. We've got a ton more Breeders' Cup videos coming sooner rather than later. JK's in Italy, but he's going to be chiming in. Also, sounds like, I think I'm allowed to talk about this. Sounds like we're going to have an earlier look than usual from Randy Moss and Jerry Bailey on the YouTube channel next week. So yeah, make sure you subscribe there wherever you get your podcasts, etc. Nick, before we get into recapping all of the Breeders' Cup prep action, I wanted to talk to you about this Paco Lopez situation. Before we get into the particulars, I'll reveal my position as saying, I guess I was surprised by a lot of the outrage, but why don't you kick us off with just a recap for those who are uninitiated? You know, we do have a lot of newer fans, especially on the YouTube side of things, who might not be fully aware of the story. Give us a brief history of Paco Lopez versus the authorities.
Yeah, and I would say, Pete, I'll call your surprise and raise up some shock that the collective reaction has been so passionate. I don't know exactly what it stems from. I have some theories, but we might need more than 30 minutes to let me fully flesh all those out. But just to give you the Cliffs Notes version. So about 9 months ago, almost 10 months ago, Paco was suspended for striking a horse named National Law across the face after the wire of a race run at Parks. And he was given essentially a summary suspension at that point of 2 years. And that suspension was stayed about 7 weeks later or so when Paco agreed to a number of items that included doing some anger management counseling, making a couple of donations to worthy causes pertaining to racing, and also basically promising that he was going to be on the up and up. And that was agreed upon between he and HISA. He was reinstated immediately. In the ensuing 9 months almost, he has incurred a number of infractions that are violations pertaining to the whip, some of them for a strike limit, the majority of them for something that I will admit I did not know was an actionable offense, according to HISA, which is that he lifted his wrist above his helmet to strike a horse. So fast forward, and now we're at a point where he was issued a 6-month suspension, and the collective reaction has been shockingly pro-Paco. I believe I would probably call it more anti-establishment than anything else. And somehow HISA is looking like the bad guy in this scenario. Now, I'm privy to a little bit more information than the average bear, which I'm also willing to share, being on the HISA Next Gen Advisory Committee. So we had a meeting yesterday and discussed the item specifically with Lisa Lazarus. She spent about the first 30 minutes of the meeting talking about that. I can assure all of you that are unaware, Paco's legal representation was notified, it's going to be Ferris Bueller style here, about 9 times throughout the year that he was incurring these infractions. They were notified specifically. They were asked going all the way back to May to address it with him. There's a bit of a language barrier for somebody like Lisa to address Paco. Paco is not a native English speaker, but that was going to be handled through Drew Malika, who's his legal representation. So, there were a number of people who either replied to me on a post I sent out yesterday asking about people's opinions that said he was completely blindsided by this. False. He was not completely blindsided by this. The very surprising thing, and let's be honest, Pete, you and I at the end of the day are horse players, right? That's what we're always going to be. What else we do is just in addition to that. Paco is somebody with a horrific record on the racetrack. He has had a number of incidents that have led to jockeys being severely injured. I drew attention to one of them yesterday, 6 years ago, when something happened with Romero Mirage, who had multiple vertebrae fractured. And he is somebody that has done things on the racetrack that initiated another rider to walk up and punch him in the face. And the irony is that rider was standing in the video that was shot on Sunday in support of Paco. And it looks to me as if the Jockeys Guild, and I have no axe to grind with the Jockeys Guild. I have no axe to grind with jockeys, period. I think jockeys perform an essential function in the game, and I admire their athleticism, their determination, their heart. I've never had an issue with any of them, other than a bad ride here or there. But they probably could take issue with a bad selection of mine or a bad race call. So it's fine. It's a two-way street. But it seems as if the concern on their part, and I'm hoping that, without going on about this too much, I'm hoping that what we saw yesterday was Mike Smith has asked for a meeting between he and John Velasquez and some representation from HISA. That feels like it'll get the right people to the table and in the room to reach some type of long-term accommodation, because the jockeys are understandably concerned about what the rules are. How can we get at least our say in them? Can we negotiate what would be a more reasonable crop strike limit? And can we discuss this wrist above the helmet rule or anything else that could lead to a long-term suspension? That all seems very reasonable, right? Lisa herself has admitted that the 6-strike limit is something that predates her. I think we all have our own individual theories on that. I've never ridden a racehorse. 6 strikes seems like more than enough to me. But Tyler Gaffalione offered up in one of the meetings I was in, maybe it's a sliding scale. Maybe you give us more strikes when it's a 2-turn race. Maybe you give us an additional strike or two when it's a 2-year-old race who might need a few more reminders or might need, for you to use it. I've always been of the opinion that good jockeys really just have the crop with them for safety purposes. And I think we've seen that play out over and over. So I guess to sum it all up, Paco's going to be gone for a while. They did not offer him a stay. They are going to deal with an appeal, and I don't think he'll win because it was made clear to him what the expectations were. He violated some of the agreement, and his defense at this point is, well, he didn't do anything as bad as striking a horse across the face.
Right.
And that's not a defense.
No, there's so much to unpack, and you're right. It's a whole podcast, especially when we get into the cushion whip and how this is a very different whip than it once was.
Correct.
And so getting into some of this minutia to me does feel a little arbitrary, but that's a whole other podcast. I think I understand the jockeys. They are using Paco as a shield to examine a practice that to them I'm sure does seem arbitrary. I'm glad we're getting the right people at the table to have that discussion. Now, Paco, after he hit that horse at Parks, I kind of never wanted to see him ride a horse again.
Yep.
So he should take his medicine and we should move on.
Yes. All he needed to do was just be a model citizen, come out, do the things you're supposed to do, play by the rules, play the game. Paco has had a habitual issue with standing up early on horses. That's something that he'll never get punished for to the extent that he needs it. Because really the only people whose interests are being protected at that point are owners and horse players. And we're the ones that put all the money into the game and basically get told what we're going to get. Right. So, yeah, I'm not going to shed a tear missing him. And look, I want everybody to understand, too, I'm somebody that made multiple comments throughout the year about Paco's ride, specifically on Bookham Dano, and how I thought he really elevated Bookham Dano this year.
He's a great rider when he's on form.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about that. But again, just get back to the inciting incident here and how heinous it was. You talk about the importance of jockeys. I couldn't agree more. You know who else we don't have a sport without? The horses.
Correct.
And you know what could really put the entire sport, everything we do, in danger? Treating horses poorly. This is the poster child for that. And that's why, but I do get there's a complexity here, and I'm very glad there's an ongoing conversation as far as the rider's interests go. But as far as Paco goes, personally, he's lucky he ever gets to ride again.
No, I agree. And one of the things that obviously HISA is concerned about, and HISA is far from a perfect entity itself, they would be the first to admit it, is public perception and the whole idea of the social license to operate. And this is a phrase that's been going around for a long, long time. So I know the TDN, I think, wrote a story that kind of intimated in a way that PETA had something to do with this suspension because, of course, PETA took a victory lap after the suspension was issued. Lisa told us yesterday she gets 10 to 12 calls or emails from PETA every week. So they did not influence this.
Right.
This is not a decision that they made. What they are is a fundraising organization that's going to use even the slightest glimpse of an accomplishment that they could take credit for, yet had nothing to do with, to raise money.
They're terrible.
Something
No
like
doubt
that.
about it. Yeah. I could do way more than 30 minutes voicing my displeasure with that, with PETA, and they should not have any seat at the table in horse racing. And I don't think the two things I just said are mutually exclusive. I think you can have the horse Yeah. Anyway, that's. I don't even want to go. I'm going to just stop it right there. We did 10 minutes on that. That's perfect. I really appreciated the way you framed that, Nick. That really helped my deeper understanding. I do, even though we see it very seriously. I think the way you just laid out the facts makes some of the jockeys here do seem more sympathetic in terms of what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I think they're sort of stuck using the support of Paco as the way to advance this conversation to the next level. But it sounds like that's happening, and that's a good thing. Let's move on to some Breeders' Cup prep action from the weekend, and let's start with something we saw on Sunday, which I thought had major implications for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Straight No Chaser back in action. I thought he was going to win and had a chance to go back to the race he won last year as one of the favorites. He emptied out like a drain in the stretch, however. Is this a question, Nick, of a horse who was maybe just a little bit short off the layoff, or is this not the same Straight No Chaser at this point?
You know, I was kind of going to ask you what you thought. I'd like to think that he needed one, but I would also like to have seen a little more fight, if that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And I think it wouldn't have been too much to ask for him to put up a little bit more resistance, especially in what ended up basically being a slow race speed. It was a 97 Beyer speed figure for the winner. Imagination is a horse that really wouldn't have struck any fear into the hearts of a top level sprinter. So it was a disappointing effort, to say the least, from Straight No Chaser. And, you know, realistically, you have to look at the fact that the last time we saw this horse, he was running a disappointing race. So, you know, have we seen the best of him? It feels like at this point we probably have. Now, clearly this division, this race, the Breeders' Cup Sprint, changed quite a bit with the announcement that Bookham Dano won't go. And I would guess at this point we're looking at probably relatively solid favoritism for a horse like Ben Tornado, depending on exactly who goes. This could prompt maybe some rerouting of horses from a race like the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile to the Sprint. We'll see the Phoenix. Obviously, we've got Lovesick Blues waiting around. We've got a couple of Eastern-based horses. The 3-year-olds don't look like maybe they would be 6 furlong types. They look more like 7/8 to mile types. So it's still a wide open division. Straight No Chaser is still the defending champion. He is a horse that really loves Del Mar, but boy, is he one that we're going to have to scrutinize the hell out of his morning activity getting up to this race to see if he comes into it a similar kind of way.
I wanted to see more, especially given the way he was bet. He was not, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into the market signal, but to me, when they come back off the layoff and they're bet that hard, that says somebody thinks they're back to what they're capable of being at this point. And to throw it in that quickly and easily, it does make me concerned. The 8-1 we advised to our international viewers on Ben Tornado a few weeks ago, looking pretty good right now. Do we think, is that Bookham Dano answer final, or is there any chance there was a bit of peak thrown in there? Connections looking to tie in the two discussions we've had on the show so far. Connections looking to put in their support of Paco. But I mean, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me not to run Bookham Dano in this race. Do we think that's official, or is it some talk?
I don't think it's official, but I do think Derek Ryan was looking for a reason to not run.
Okay.
And the Paco suspension, I guess, sort of helped him get to that point. He did say pretty early he wanted to figure out how to get him to the 26 Breeders' Cup at Keeneland. So, you know, he's a gelding, and they can run in the Saudi sprint race, 3-odd sprint. Next year, they could probably try and go a mile if they want to do it, and are just looking to make money. So at this point, yes, it looks that way. And yeah, the 8-1 on Ben Tornado that we touted looks damn good.
Cigar Mile, maybe. I mean, there's plenty of things in between. It does seem a little crazy to skip this year's Breeders' Cup to start pointing to next year's Breeders' Cup. But hey, we'll see how it all plays out.
As long as he doesn't train him up to it.
That'll be something. We're training up to the 2027 sprint. We'll skip another year. Why not? Yeah. It's modern horse racing after all. Let's get back to a couple of the big stars we saw on Saturday. I want to make sure we get these in. I'll throw this open to you for some of the ones that you want to talk about. So much Breeders' Cup prep action happening left, right, and center. But the Lucas Classic, one of the most famous horses in training, a Derby winner once again, showing he loves it under those twin spires. It's an interesting trip there for Mystic Dan. He eventually gets through on the inside, scores with 100 Beyer speed figure. What did you make of this Mystic Dan effort in the Lucas Classic? And you'd assume this is going to lead, as Kenny McPeak alluded to a cutback in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Is he a serious contender in there?
Yeah, I think it'll depend, of course, on who comes together. That's a spot potentially for both Patch Adams and Isos. So in that case, I don't think he'd win. But he would be a contender. And look, it's fun to have Mystic Dan running no matter what. He's the Derby winner. Nothing's ever going to take that away from him. He got 100 buyer. He has. I think Kenny McPeak deserves a little more attention and a little more probably credit than he's gotten for the fact that he turned Torpedo Anna and Mystic Dan's sort of campaigns around in season, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to do that.
No.
It's obviously easier when you have better horses, but each of them looked like they could be backsliding form-wise, and he just kind of backed off them a little bit, gave them time, and they turned things around quickly. So I thought this was a very heady ride by Fernando Arrieta. I forget. I either call him Francisco or Fernando every time, and I think I get it wrong. I think it's Francisco Arrieta. So with apologies, but it was a very good ride. It was one of those probably low risk, high reward rides, Pete, where you're trying to save ground, and yeah, you look like a complete dipshit if you don't get through, but you look great if you do. So, and he ended up coming up aces up the inside. So good effort, solid effort by the runner-up Disarm, who is a horse that had been knocking heads with some of the heavies and hadn't been able to get there, but ran a big race in this spot, was quite a bit more forward as well. Do I think either of these horses, obviously I don't think Mystic Dan will run in it. Do I think either of these horses strike a lot of fear into the hearts of the classic contenders? No. In other years, perhaps, but this classic is coming up very, very strong.
Yeah, this was 100 is a grade 3, grade 2
Correct.
Type of a number. We are looking at this classic being we talk about grade 1s, grade 1 pluses. This might be a grade 1 plus
Correct.
This time around. But I did like the courage Mystic Dan showed. I mean, it was on the pan the first time. I thought it was like real, like crazy trouble, but it was trouble. I mean, he got shouldered. He had to fight his way through. If he didn't have the dog in him, he wouldn't have won. So it was a very solid effort all in all. He'll be a fun horse and a fun storyline. Great to have a Derby winner, another Derby winner competing at the Breeders' Cup. So that's going to be super fun. Let's talk about Rebels Romance, because to me, all along I was thinking he was a contender for the Breeders' Cup turf, but quite possibly, the second best in his own barn, as it were, depending on who Godolphin decided to send over. Knowing this is the prep race, knowing how Appleby operates, to see him do what he did in this race, I feel like he is now, I haven't checked the prices on this, but in my view, he's number one with a bullet. When we'll do a hot take video at some point on Breeders' Cup, I'm willing to declare him the winner of the turf off this effort. Am I being too complimentary?
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess it would boil down to whether is Ombudsman a possibility to come over?
He is.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, one of the things that Rebels Romance has going for him from a wagering perspective is obviously the American betting community is very familiar with him. And he would be going for a third Breeders' Cup turf, which is an unprecedented number. Shockingly, he would be going for 3 and 4 years, which is obviously not the easiest thing to do.
Crazy.
But he's still very sharp, Pete. He looked very good. Redistricting had established command, and it looked like he was just going to stalk. And Frankie kind of said, "You know what? The hell with it. Let's go on with it." He went up and grabbed the lead, and he came off the turn. And I forget the terminology that Chris Griffin is a friend of mine, so I can say this, but he said something like, "We're waiting on the run," or "Here comes the run from Rebels Romance," or something like that. And it was like, bro, he's like 4 lengths in front, man. This is a blowout.
It was a blink and you missed it. Kind of, he quickened at an unexpected
point. He did, and I think that was where Chris was waiting on. To see exactly. And so I guess it was just inside the quarter pole. All of a sudden, as you're saying, I mean, he put 3 or 4 on them in no time. And those are not bad horses that were behind him. Obviously, his stablemate El Cordobas had won the Sword Dancer, and Redistricting is a grade 2 winner in his own right. So, and he made them look very ordinary. He made them look to the point where it's like, why would I send this horse to San Diego? There's no reason, no way I can beat Rebels Romance. So he looked like the best version of what we've seen of him stateside. And previously we've seen him look really good. So he'll be he looms at this point one of the shorter price favorites on the weekend.
it's a fun market right now and a really interesting contingent that appear to be pointed this way. Current favorite at the sharpest book is Minnie Hawk, the Philly dual classic winner. That's interesting to see her at top of the market, knowing they have another race target. Maybe I missed it and they committed definitely to the turf. That's the only way I can explain her being short is 7-2. And then choices at 4-1. Ombudsman and Rebels Romance, and surely that will change. They will whichever one Buick rides, you would think would then would probably go considerably shorter, like what happened with Nation's Pride a couple of years ago, unless for some reason they promised Dettori he could have the mount and the breeders. There could be some weird jockey shenanigans, but usually with Godolphin it's pretty cut and dried in terms of the top jockey. With the number one. A couple other interesting names to mention while we're talking about it, and horses that folks should just start getting familiar. It's never too early to start watching the tape of the key preps that we see year in, year out. And obviously we've got another one, nobody's idea of a prep in Europe, but the Arc on Sunday, which we'll have covered for you over on the Breeders' Cup on the In the Money Plus side, worth watching. But Calandigan, the gelding, I've always thought he was from early in the year, thought he was interesting because he's not eligible for the Arc. Right. So I thought there was a chance they'd circle Breeders' Cup Turf as a target. But then the other interesting one is Delacroix, who, of course, is Tepin's offspring. So that's an unbelievable story as well, and one you think they would send. So it's going to be interesting to see how that market shakes out. Well, where should we go next, my friend?
I suppose we could talk about Locked.
I was impressed with Locked. I was impressed with him because 98 Beyer speed figure isn't setting any records or making you think about the classic. And I don't know if they committed classic or dirt mile, but he had to do his own dirty work in a way that I think probably necessarily made his final figure lower, because in a 3-horse race, tactically, he was ceding to me every advantage to Phileas Fogg. So that's really like a 98 that plays to me more like a 101. Now that still doesn't get you sniff in the classic, but it's a nicer effort than it looks in the bare form, I think. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It was also the only 2-turn race on the card. So it's always a little more difficult to tell where you should be speed figure wise. The first quarter was really slow, and the race sped up noticeably as it went on. So I would probably upgrade him a little bit for that as well.
Good point.
It was just kind of a back from the dead performance, right? I mean, he looked awful in the Suburban. He did not run well in the Ali Sheba, and he is still there. He is still capable. I don't know if maybe the jockey difference was a factor. He will not have the same jockey in the Breeders' Cup Classic if they go there, obviously with John Velasquez committed, but it was nice to see him back. He's also a horse that probably benefits from every bit of the 1.25 miles. And he feels like one that could be live for a chug-along 3rd or 4th place finish to get some of the spoils in the Classic.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, he figure-wise going to have so much to find even to get there, but he could do it. He's headed back in the right direction, and his form just, again, he's probably a little bit better than just when you look at that paper. So this could be this could be a huge price in there, right?
Right. And he's also not as good as the Big Cap and not as bad as the Ali Sheba and the Suburban. So you look at the Big Cap, he got a 109 fig in the Big Cap, but that was obviously the best version of Locked that we've ever seen. And the likelihood that version comes back feels probably pretty low.
Here's one very small bet I am going to make in the Breeders' Cup Turf, and it will relate to another one of the big races from the weekend. Gold Phoenix gets the job done in the John Henry at Santa Anita with a 99 Beyer speed figure. I will do a bottom-up super key with him in 4th, and just contenders, Gold Phoenix, because he's going to fire. He's not going to be good enough to crack the exacta, but over his favorite course, why not? A third, 4th, or maybe even 5th. You might even have to mess around with the super high 5. He's just such a cool horse. It's so great. I mean, we don't often in flat racing get to talk about horses like Rebels Romance and Gold Phoenix just plying their trade year after year and winning these big races. It makes just the pure racing fan in me very happy. Gold Phoenix knocked me out of, I didn't have him. I was trying to beat him the other day, but it was one of those, and I was on TV for it. I was just smiling anyway. It's great to see. He's such a cool horse.
Yeah, 4th at 32-1 in the 24 Breeders' Cup Turf, 4th at 51-1 in the 23 Breeders' Cup Turf. So obviously this would hardly shock, right? Yeah. I mean, it's been since 22 that he wasn't in the mix in the Breeders' Cup Turf. So just, super easy horse to like, whether you're friendly with the Little Red Feather people or not. And obviously we are, but an easy horse to root for. And it's a home game for him. So as you say, that probably is enough to upgrade his chances a little bit.
For sure. He loves that racetrack. Let's talk about the Goodwood Grade 1 action out at Santa Anita. Nevada Beach winning with a 101 Beyer speed figure in this one. What did you think of this effort, and what do you think, if any, the implications will be going forward?
Yeah, this effort felt like it was probably somewhat on the surprising side. And, part of it was that Bob said pretty early on this was going to be his Travers horse around the 4th of July, right before Del Mar. And then he kind of disappeared from the work tab and wasn't going to be ready for the Travers. So he rerouted him. This was a pretty big step forward, Pete. I mean, This was a considerably faster race, and he looked very good in going about his business the way he did. This was also a situation where he was getting Mike Smith for the first time because Juan Hernandez was going to be on Full Serrano. I think the biggest takeaway from the race is that Full Serrano doesn't want to go much beyond a mile. And as much as they may have wanted to get him to a race like the Pacific Classic, he ran second in the Mixto Pacific Classic.
Right.
So not exactly a vintage rendition. And so I would say we'll probably see Full Serrano shorten up, and we'll probably see Nevada Beach be one of the better handicap horses for 26, depending on who ends up retiring from what we're seeing right now, which it feels like a lot of them will. And whether he's ready for the Breeders' Cup Classic right now, I doubt it, but he feels like a horse that certainly has plenty of upside.
I wonder if they might consider also coming back in the dirt mile just to stay out of the Shark Tank. Did Bob say anything after the race?
Well, Nisos would be a problem for that.
That's right.
Bob. So, what I think they probably have to consider, and I know this sounds like blasphemy, but is the Clark.
Right.
And just avoid all of this scrum in a month and stay away from it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one as well. Is that what grade is the Clark? Do you know?
It's a grade 2 now.
Right.
But he's got a grade 1, and you're what you're trying to do with this horse is get him to the Pegasus and figure out whether you want to travel with him.
Yeah,
and I don't think Bob will be in as big a rush to go to Dubai or Saudi as he's been in the past. But with the right horse, he certainly would. This feels like he'd be a Saudi Cup type horse.
Couple others I want to mention before we wrap this segment of the show. The Ack at Churchill Downs, won by Tumbarumba. Our friends at Mill Ridge get an Oscar Performance baby in the winner's circle, 93 Beyer speed figure. I have to say, one of the things that surprised me the most, not that I'm some expert on breeding, but the fact that these Oscar Performances are continuing to win at as much as they are on dirt, him being by his Kitten's Joy, and you don't see a lot of Kitten's Joy on dirt, but obviously Oscar brings multiple surface talent to the proceedings and gets another stakes winner for our pals over there.
Yeah, I hope it was Price or whoever it was that thought we really need to stand Oscar Performance because he could be a good dirt stallion. I mean, I would have laughed in that person.
I would have said, I'm not saying turf, sure.
I would have said, let me bet against that. But you know what? He's a damn good dirt stallion. It's amazing. Because you look at the female side, I mean, there's no dirt influence at all.
Yeah.
But he's really solid. And it was a slow race. I could have used Tumbarumba in the 24 ACAC. But a year later, he gets the job done at a decent price too.
The way horse players look at the world, it's great.
Oh.
Gallant Bloom, we need to shout out. Other folks we know, but that's not why we're talking about it. But our disaster. This was a strong speed figure, 96. What do you think? Is she potentially a player in the filly and mare sprint off that?
I think she has to be. It was a fast race. It was actually a faster race by raw figure. By a pretty considerable margin than the Vosburg.
Interesting.
And so, the Vosburg is actually a projected number that keeps it at the 96. I think that it got 96 or 98. This was good. Our disaster looked good. Really ran them off their feet. And, Safi won this race last year. So I would imagine he'll want to go back to the filly and mare sprint. There is other speed signed up. So we'll see, how it shakes out. But I would assume they've got to go there. And off this performance, they'd be fools not to.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It was able to control the pace in a way that we'll have to take a look at how the complexion of the field continues to shake out. Not a bad thing to have Jason Worth with a shot at the Breeders' Cup, and good for our buddy Rich Averill, double R as we call him around here as well. You mentioned the Vosburg Patriot Spirit. On paper, it just dovetailed so perfectly. So that's a little to only get the 96, and knowing that's projected up, that's probably not going to play with the best in that division. Is my gut reaction.
No, and I don't think he's really a 6 furlong horse, right? He's probably a little bit more geared towards 7. He has turned into a nice horse, and credit to Michael Campbell, Midwest trainer, that's done a great job with this horse. And he's a grade 3 type, a grade 2.5 type. So I don't really think they're going to go big game hunting in the Breeders' Cup.
Get out your bingo card, because I'm going to hit on one of our reoccurring themes here. We talked about Johannes and turf form trying to ship east. Much better when those West Coast runners get to run at their preferred places. Not that they don't win sometimes, big races, Kentucky Downs, etc. But Johannes back at home, 100 in the City of Hope mile, and a horse that ran so big in the Breeders' Cup mile last year. I'm not going to rule out another big performance, again, pending who turns up. How serious of a contender do you see him in that test? Or like me, are you just going to wait and see the field before making a prediction one way or the other?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the 24 version of him was quite a bit better than this one. This was a little bit more workmanlike than I would have liked to see. With that said, I have a lot of respect for Johannes. He's a horse that fires the majority of the time. I would have loved to see him with another opportunity in the eastern half of the United States with a clean trip, because I mean, his race was over at Saratoga before they hit the first.
That's fair. Maybe I shouldn't have counted that against him as much. It was just an excuse to mention East Coast form shipping west. But that's fair.
It's an excuse for you to pee on West Coast turf form, Pete. It's okay, right? I mean, even the West Coasters they're not gonna quibble with us much on that. However, I will say that what we saw in last year's Breeders' Cup and what we've seen a little bit more is that with more of their racing going to turf, their turf racing is getting better.
Yeah.
It's still not East Coast turf racing, but it's definitely better, and it's probably to be respected a little bit more. And Johannes ran, look, we were talking about Gold Phoenix, Ironman Cal ran second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf last year, so they've obviously had plenty of success in the turf sprint, Belvoir Bay and other horses that ran out west. So, but yeah, I don't think this version of Johannes is going to be, if we get notable speech, we're supposed to get Diego Velasquez in there. He's supposed to run at Keeneland on Saturday. This Coolmore Turf Mile, not that we're previewing, but I'm eager to see the entries in a few hours and see who's in there, because it should be very, very good. Then I can watch the morning line.
Well, that's right. We'll save that conversation for later in the week. We will bring you back to talk Keeneland on Saturday. But boy, there's heavy hitters for this mile. Notable speech, top of the market. We know about him. Field of Gold, so brilliant around midsummer in England. They were talking about him as the best miler, full stop, let alone best 3-year-old. Rosalian looks like he's going to be in there. Henri Matisse's name is there as well. We know all about him from last year. Johannes currently at the sharpest book, 11-1 to make a attempt, another tilt at this Breeders' Cup mile. Okay, I've kept you longer than I said I would. We've got other guests on the audio side in the green room. But yeah, you'll be back with me, and we'll talk about those Saturday races at Keeneland very soon. Appreciate having you, my friend.
Anytime. Talk to you later.
Folks folks interested in more about these European contenders, I'll put in one other plug for the In the Money Plus service. We will once again have figure equivalencies, which showed themselves to be pretty accurate, I would say, last year. That's just one of the many things we have as part of our Breeders' Cup package. Get involved in themoneypodcast.com/plus.